Hey guys, it's Caden. Welcome to another Autism Digest interview, where today we have someone who a lot of people have grown up on. You might know him as the producer of Revenge of the Nerds. Given that by the time this release it'll be the anniversary of the film, I figured it was only right to bring on Peter Samuelson. Thanks for coming on, Pete.
I'm so happy to be here. Although I'm shocked because you say when we released the film, and you're absolutely right. Um, that means that I made that film 40 years ago, right?
Yes, sir. And I was lucky enough to be exposed to it. I'm 21. Right. My first question for you is, for those that somehow don't know you, do you mind telling a bit of your story in your own words?
I'm happy to. So I grew up in London, England, and first kind of pivot for me, my 10th grade English teacher, Mr. Lund, said to me, see me after school, which of course is never a good idea. And I remember he kind of poked me in the chest with his finger and he said, now listen, if you work about twice as hard and if I help you, you could get into a really good university. And I said, oh yeah, what, like where? And he said, oh, I don't know, Oxford, Cambridge, somewhere like that. And I remember I laughed at him and I said, I don't think I'm going to college. No one in my entire family has ever been to university, got a degree. And in fact, my dad left school at 14. And he said, oh, well, then it'll be even better because you will be the first one. And so I did what he said. And I got myself a scholarship to Cambridge University. And I got my bachelor's, I got my master's, and I came out and looked around and realized that because he had encouraged me to study his favorite subject, which was English literature, there was absolutely no employment anywhere that I could see in England for someone who knew a whole lot about medieval English literature, but really very little about anything else. So I had earned pocket money while I was in university by being an English French, French English interpreter. And in fact, my gap year between high school and college, I was the unit interpreter on an enormous American film that was made about motor racing in France called Le Mans. And that was my gap year. But right after I left Cambridge, I worked on a film for an American producer that was about the Monte Carlo Rally. And we followed the winners of it from Marrakesh up through Morocco, on the ferry over into Spain, Algeciras, across Spain and into France and along the south of France to Monte Carlo. And it all went very, very well. And I kind of was more than an interpreter because he was so busy, he would send me off to go and do something instead of him. And I go do it. And at the end of it, he said, you know, you don't know anything about editing. Why don't you come back to Los Angeles with us and you'll learn? And I said, well, is this a job offer? And he said, yeah, we'll give you a job. And, we have a studio in Hollywood. And I said, would I earn, money? And he said, you would earn money. And I said, would it be enough that I could get an apartment? And I think you need a car in LA, right? And so forth. And he said, yes. And in fact, my family and we have a house out in Tarzana, and we have a spare room and we have a spare car. And you could borrow both for a month or two while you get on your feet. So that was the beginning of my American adventure. And I got a visa and I moved out. I was single and I just fell in love with the United States. And, I was shocked to read what it said on the base of the Statue of Liberty. Give us your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. But I thought, I could be a huddled mass. But more seriously, I kind of fell in love with American people because I found them, and I have found them ever since, to be incredibly kind and generous. Not so kind, some of them at the moment, but generally over the years I've been here. And I fell in love with the country. I mean, it's such a diverse, extraordinary. The great thing about doing what Tony Bushing, that's the producer who gave me the job, he made television commercials mostly, Paisley Productions. And the great thing about television commercials is every 2 weeks you're making a different one. Here I am in the Navajo Indian Reservation. Here I am in Seattle. Oh, Chicago. Wow, Manhattan, and so forth. So I kind of learned America by being all over the place that 2 or 3 years. And that was the beginning of my career. And I worked worked my way up as one does. And I worked very hard. And hopefully I was pretty damn good at it. And 1980, I produced my first film, where I was the producer. And you talk about Revenge of the Nerds. We made it in 1983, and it was released in, I guess, 84, I think. So, yeah, it's not a very politically correct film. It's amazing how over those decades, what you allow yourself to say and frankly to think has changed. There's stuff in that film that I'm not particularly proud of. I do think it is still very funny, but there's stuff in it like, I don't know when was the last time you saw it, but the Anthony Edwards playing the lead nerd, he persuades the blonde girlfriend, played by Julie Montgomery, of the lead jock, played by Ted McGinley. The lead nerd persuades her to have sex with him in the bouncy house under false pretenses. There's a fancy dress party going on, and he wears a Darth Vader mask, and she thinks he's the boyfriend, her boyfriend. So I don't think we would put that. I'm sure that's rape legally, and I know it was a comedy, but I don't think I would put that in a film now. However, it remains deliciously funny, the whole thing. And I remember when when you make a film, you test it. There's a thing called the National Research Group, and they give everybody cards to fill in after a test screening. And we flew on the 20th Century Fox jet to Phoenix, and we tested it. And when all the cards were handed in by the audience, I said to the Tom Rothman, the head of distribution back then of Fox, I said, I have no frame of reference. It's the first film I've produced. I haven't been to a test screening before. What does this mean, this score? And he had by then the summary of the cards. And he said, it is the worst result I have ever seen since I worked at the studio. And I said, seriously? Wow. How long have you worked at the studio? And he said, 12 years. So we flew back to LA convinced it was a catastrophe and that no one was going to find it funny, and we were all going to be out of a job. And I would never produce a film again. And what they do, a studio film, big studio film, they phone you on Saturday morning and tell you what happened at the screenings across the country on Friday. And they phoned me on the Saturday morning and they said, very respectable, much more than we had expected given the test screening. Film did really very well. We're very happy. And he said, and I'll phone you tomorrow morning and tell you how it did on Saturday, which is the bigger day. You phoned me on Sunday morning, and he said Saturday was a monster. It did hugely well. people who went on Friday told everybody they could think of they had to go and see it on Saturday. It was a giant hit. And then he said, I'll phone you Monday morning, tell you how it did on Sunday. And he phoned me on Monday morning and he said, Sunday is always smaller than Saturday, but not your film. Your Sunday was many times bigger than Saturday. Anyway, it went on and was one of the biggest financial successes of any film that year. And that summer, it was the top-rated comedy. And there you go. Revenge of the Nerds. There were 3 sequels. I didn't make them. The studio did with different producers. I don't think they were as good. But I'm proud of our first one, other than the scene in the bouncy house.
And look at you now. I definitely liked how you started with that story about your teacher. As a recent college graduate, I can definitely relate to it. Speaking of your film, looking back on Revenge of Nerds, how do you think audiences' perceptions of nerds and social outsiders have evolved over the decades?
Well, I'd like to think that, I've been an outsider myself. I'd like to think we're doing better. And in some ways, I think we are. Once upon a time, before the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, people in wheelchairs couldn't serve as judges. And the people who said, we've got to put ramps up to the dais in a court so that we can have a wheelchair bound judge. Other people said, no, it's a waste of time. There aren't any wheelchair bound judges, to which the other group said, why do you think that is? They can't physically get up there and be a judge. So in some basic ways, I think we've made, great progress. The same people who need to use wheelchairs don't have to park half a mile away now from the front door in a parking lot because they got those blue spaces. I'm working on a film at the moment that is about the insurrection that was led by deaf students in the 1980s at the University for the Deaf, Gallaudet, in Washington, D.C., where the Board of Governors, in its infinite wisdom, decided that yet again they'd never had a deaf president, and they decided that, damn it, it's a university for the deaf. You need to go and find a deaf president and elect them. And they wouldn't do it. And the students locked down the university and did a sit-in and marched on Congress and bolted, closed the gates. And when that didn't work, they commandeered school buses and let the air out of the tires and blocked off the entrances. And it was a huge, big deal and was all over television and in the news. And they won. And the Board of Governors backtracked, and the president that they were about to appoint, who was hearing, stood down, said, I see the point that the students are making, and I think you should go and get a deaf president as well. And they did, and the president has always been deaf ever since. So, I think that there is this progress that has been made, but I don't think the intrinsic bad things in humans have gone away. I think bullying in school of anyone who is different, frankly, in any way, I think bullying is still as awful and disgusting as it ever was. I was bullied, it feels terrible and it's BS, but that doesn't make it any less cruel. I kind of think there are 2 instincts in humans, and I think they're probably in the DNA. One is an instinct of fear, and fear doesn't feel very good. So when a leader comes along, whether it's the chief bully or whether it's an evil politician and says, no, you don't have to be scared of these people who sound different or look different or act different or dress different or have different colored skin, whatever. You don't have to be scared. Let's all hate them together and follow me, and we'll, bang the drum and feel good about hating them. I think it's probably been in the DNA since we all lived in caves. Several years ago, I was invited by close friends to take my wife and children, and we all went off because this other family had rented a chateau, a castle in Perigord in France. And we went and had 2 weeks there by their generosity, and we had a fine old time. And down the road, there was a prehistoric cave system. So we went and we got a guide and we took flashlights and we went in these caves. It was shocking. I don't think I'd ever been in a prehistoric cave before. And sure, there were the pictograms of wild animals on the walls and all of that. But it was so scary. It was cold. It was dark. It had a very low ceiling. You had to be very careful you didn't bash your head. And I could easily imagine being there in prehistoric times and being scared of everything. Strange noises at night coming in through the entrance of the cave. Are wild animals going to attack us? And I could imagine that those, whoever was the leader of the cave, if they said, you don't have to be scared of those peculiar people who live over the other side of the valley, and they look different, and they have funny hair, and they, different colored skin and different clothes and stuff. Stick with me, and we'll all hate them together because they are other. So I think that instinct to be scared of other and to hate other is definitely there in the genome. There isn't something else that is there, which is the feeling in your heart of kindness, empathy, reaching out to other, building bridges. That's how you make a civilization. And I think when we came out of the caves, if you like, Samuelson's first law of caves, you can take the people out of the caves, but you can't take the caves out of the people. And I think, your average Joe still has both instincts, the instinct to be embracing and kind on the one hand, and the instinct to be cruel, divisive to other people, to shout and scream and punch people in the face and bully and all the other awful stuff. I think it's all around us. And I personally believe there is an obligation on all of us to be the first and not the second. We have to build bridges of kindness and empathy. And by doing that, I think we make the world a better place. And especially in these times where cruel, horrible leaders, and it's not a political statement, I think that there are some cruel, horrible leaders on both ends of the political spectrum, especially when they seem to be doing rather well. I think we who actually feel empathy had better do more of the empathy and more kindness. I'm working right now on an initiative to try and make more kindness happen in the world.
And that's something I admire, and I agree with you. We've always had those traits for generations, long before my generation came along. I think it's only enhanced since Gen Z was born because they're super influenced by the generations before them, such as the political leaders and the influencers. The big thing I've been telling people when I hit my own media circuit is we need to learn how to be civilized without acting like animals.
Well, I think you're being rude to the animals. Animals generally tend not to fight too much, and certainly they don't kill each other except if they're very hungry. But they don't do it for fun. You don't see an animal fighting another animal, let alone killing it just for its own amusement. I think it's a particularly human thing. Let me talk about autism. I've thought since I started in the film industry, you meet a ton of people who are on the spectrum, and they are amongst your most valuable crew members. And I've therefore sort of come to know and value people on the spectrum for 40 years, often with prodigious skills that make them very valuable. You know, the ability to do math in their head to a degree that is mind-boggling, that kind of thing. You need that when you do something very complicated and financially challenging, like making a film. The ability to concentrate. You know, the number of editors that I've worked with who I believe, I mean, I've never sort of asked them, but who I think pretty clearly are on the spectrum. To be an editor, you have to sit in a room in semi-darkness for 12, 14, 16 hours at a time. You have to memorize every stitch of all the shots that have been filmed. You have to run it around in your head and come up with a hypothesis of how you're going to edit it together, highest, and what is the best angle for that part of the dialogue, and the best angle for this part, and that's the one that was ended prematurely, so we can't use that, but what about this one, what about that one? Those are skills that you find. I've also got relatives who are on the spectrum, and I would say, maybe not coincidentally, they are also probably in sheer raw IQ, probably the smartest as measured by IQ, but definitely on the spectrum. And so I've never thought this is some kind of, life stopping handicap. I think even the word handicap is kind of, a misnomer. I think of it as being a difference, but in some ways better and some ways more challenging. I mean, I'm not diminishing that to be on the spectrum, creates, I mean, I think, in school, middle school, it'll get you bullied more than the average bear. On the other hand, I think come out of school and college and go off into the workplace, if you can find the right job, you'll do it better. I remember saying to one young man, "Why do they love you so much at the pharmacy?" And he said, "Well, because I've memorized the physician's desk reference, which is a book that's about that thick." Who would do that? And who would be capable of doing that? But he had it all in his head. So, yeah, that's what I think. I also think there are some amazing musicians, with perfect pitch, who are on the spectrum. The amount of practicing to get good at playing the trumpet or anything where you make the notes, or frankly, any instrument, I mean, including ones where the instrument makes the notes, but you've got to press the right keys like the piano. I think it may actually be an advantage. So I think, handicapped is an adjective that was invented by people who, didn't think it through clearly. I think it's one of those words that ought to be, not politically correct, because I think it's rude and pejorative. And I also think it's not true. I think, there's all sorts of things. I think, very often people who have a challenge, especially, being on the, maybe some kind of difference in their mental positioning in the world, I think they can do a lot of stuff better than anyone else. And, I can't tell you that someone who is blind can hear better. But I do note that there have been an awful lot of blind people who have been extraordinary musicians. And what is that? Is that because their brain compensated and the part of their cortex that deals with hearing grew bigger because their optic nerve wasn't feeding sight to the sight part of their brain, but so they heard or smelled, or they used their other faculties more than they would otherwise have. I don't know. I'm no scientific expert, but bottom line for me, we need more kindness in the world. And who the hell are these people? How dare they? Other people. If anyone should be othered, it is cruel, Philistine, rah, nutty, evil people who seek to divide us for their own corruption, gain, and benefit, and to make themselves feel good. I reckon, why do people join the gang of bullies in a school? Well, it feels good, I guess, to be a bully. Yeah, you can walk away having communally beaten up one cowering guy sitting on the, under the lockers. I guess they would walk away feeling, oh, we're bigger, better, bolder, and we can run faster, and we're does that make them better humans? No, I think it makes them disgusting. So I think we need more kindness, we need more empathy, and I think we need a bit more scientific accuracy, and to realize that certainly people on the spectrum aren't worse or less. I think in some areas they're more and better. So there you go.
Exactly. And most of all, we need more empathy, which you touched on a lot in society, which turns us into beautifully into my next question for you. Going into filmmaking for a bit, what makes a neurodivergent character feel authentic rather than stereotypical?
Well, I mean, let me be honest. In Revenge of the Nerds, I think we were stereotypical. What we did is we started with the stereotype. I remember when we did the press tour, when we launched the film, we said, all right, what are all the stereotypical things? And we all dressed as nerds, or at least how the stereotype of being a nerd was. We all had plastic pocket protectors with pens and a comb and your eyeglasses in them, and also the kit to fix your eyeglasses and a Band-Aid. Like, we had these giveaway plastic pocket protector things. And also, if you took it off and you opened it, had a picture of your mother in it, because we thought that was a nice touch, and maybe nerds would love their mothers even more than the average person. So I think it was a film of stereotypes, but then we started with the stereotype, but then we gave them an extra dimension. I mean, Bobby Carradine and Anthony Edwards, their characters, the lead nerds, or Booger, that was a good one, or any of the other ones, Poindexter. We tried to give them an extra dimension that would make us empathize with them, because we figured, well, not everyone watching the film will be a nerd, so we've got to find points of attachment with our characters to make them sympathetic. So, I mean, we made Anthony Edwards very brave, and we made Bobby Carradine very brave. At the end of the film, when he's thrown in the fountain, he tries to make a speech at a pep rally on a football field of the college, and he's in the beginning of his speech, and the jocks come and they lift him up and throw him in the fountain to stop him speaking. And he climbs out and he goes back, and he gets the microphone and he carries on with his speech. And he says something along the lines of, if you ever felt picked upon, if you ever felt that people were mean to you, that you weren't respected, if you were ever beaten up and abused, come join us, because you're a nerd too. And there's a lovely wide shot of the whole stadium where 1 by 1 by 3 by 5 by 20 by 50 by 100, all the alumni come down and the other students, leaving like 24 jocks sitting looking a bit lonely and sheepish in the stands. And then we got the rights to We Are the Champions by Queen, and that is the anthem at the end of the film. So in the end, the nerds win. Before we made that film, the word nerd primarily referred to that hard candy that you get in a little packet and it breaks your teeth. After we made the film, a nerd was I don't know what to call it, a person who others might feel was a little awkward, possibly someone who was on the spectrum or someone who was neurodivergent. Anyone othered was, by the definition of our film, anyone who ever felt, damn, am I ever going to fit in here? Are they ever going to stop being mean to me? That's who we made the film for. I kind of made it for me because, I felt that way in school too. Interestingly, it's the neurodivergent chaps and women, and it's the nerds, and it's the people on the spectrum who then go on and conquer the world and become, multi-billionaires. Look at, what do Steve Jobs, what do Elon Musk, what do the leaders of the 4 big AI companies, what do they all have in common? I'll tell you. You know what I'm going to say. They all appear to be on or have been on the spectrum. Why is there that Venn diagram, that overlap between very, very high achievement in business on the one hand and being on the spectrum in the other? Well, the ability to be obsessed with making something work, the ability to work ridiculous hours without, getting sleepy or bored, the ability to continue banging away to find a solution, the ability to be uncompromising in seeking excellence. These are traits which may well not make you popular, in a bar, but they definitely make you successful if you want to have a career in business, especially in startup entrepreneurship. If you read up on Steve Jobs, if you read up on Mark Zuckerberg, the world is full, and also go to the scientists, run your finger down, or actually it's even easier, do an AI search. Who are the Nobel laureates in history who were famous and on the spectrum? And you will find 10 dozen names you've heard of, because it's not a coincidence. You excel in things because you go the last mile in pursuing them. And often that is the difference between success and failure. And that is why there are so many hugely successful people on the spectrum. They focused, they had big brains, and they didn't give up until they succeeded.
Exactly. I can think of an example of myself. Getting these together. I'm super dedicated, and thanks to my work ethic, which is definitely attributed to autism, I've been able to book these amazing opportunities. You, the lead singer, one time when I told my parents about that one specifically, their jaws dropped and they wondered, how can this individual get all these people? And that's because I'm incredibly dedicated. So I can definitely relate to those comments, which leads beautifully into my last question for you. Apart from your film, The Deaf Judge, and apart from your kindness initiative, do you have anything else you want to promote, such as a Revenge of a Nerd sequel that touches on AI chatbots?
No. I tell you what I want to promote, and I hope everybody that's watching here will join in doing it. I'm going to use a visual aid. There you go. So what is that? Well, ROK stands for Random Opportunities for Kindness. As I said earlier, I think there is not enough kindness in the world, and I think the haters are doing appallingly well, because hatred is a very robust, muscular human emotion. You know, people enjoy hating, and it's usually because they're scared stiff and they follow someone who says to them, you don't have to be scared, follow me, we'll all hate them together. There's too much of it. It's destructive, it's corrosive, it's poisonous of society, it's no way to raise children, it's awful, and it's going to be the death of us. What do? Well, the whole of my life as a film producer, I have also in parallel used the producer's toolkit to do startup entrepreneurship to address big social challenges. I founded the Starlight Children's Foundation because I thought seriously ill children in hospital were really sad and we should try and make them happy. Steven Spielberg and I started the world's very first social network, Starbright World, in 1990, and we launched it in 1994. And it was long before Facebook or MySpace or any of the other interactive platforms. And we were there first. And we linked seriously ill children together, hospital to hospital, with very early T3 lines, broadband lines. It was so early that two guys with a backhoe had to dig a trench to put in the cable that would carry the signal from the main road into the hospital because they didn't have one. So, and then EDAR, Everyone Deserves a Roof. I hold the patent on a single user 4-wheeled mobile homeless shelter. Not nearly as good as an apartment, but they only cost $500 each. And it's a lot better than a damp cardboard box on a rainy night. So all in all, 8 nonprofits. My 9th is ROK, Random Opportunities for Kindness. So here is what it is. It's best done with an example. You're in a supermarket, let's say, and the old lady in front of you is counting out pennies and nickels and dimes, and she doesn't have enough money to pay for her not very many groceries. Oh, what to do? And you lean in and you give your credit card to the checkout clerk and you say quietly, just put it on there and we can all go home. The old lady is shocked, turns around and says, oh, how can I ever thank you? And you give her a little card. It looks like this. You give her a little card like that, and you say, scan the code or put in the website address, join us, register, and pay it forward. I'd like to ask you, thank you for thanking me, but it's not really necessary. It's my great pleasure. But could you please do a few random acts of kindness forwards? Now she goes off and she says, of course I can do that. And she signs up and she does that. The whole thing, the whole system, the whole platform, the app, the website, it's all non-profit. It's a 501c3 charity. We're volunteers running it. When she, let's say she does 3 acts of kindness, when she registers those, she gets 10 points for each, and you get 5. And when the people she does the acts of kindness for, and she gives them some of the cards, which she printed out from the website and the app, when those people, so now there's 9 acts of kindness in this family tree of kindness, when they do acts of kindness, they get 10 points each. She gets 5 for each of their 9. And then you get 1 for each of their 9. And you stack up points, and it's a bit like an airline frequent flyer system, except we don't have bronze and silver and gold. We have rock climber and rock star and rock champion. And if you get high enough up the leaderboard, you have advantages. First of all, you get a little medal for each level that you can put next to your email address and put on your social media. And we are about to be all over Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and YouTube, etc., and X. But in addition, if you get to the top, so far the governors of 15 states are going to regularly, we think quarterly, they're going to have an event where they will celebrate in the state capitol at a press conference the kindest people in the state, measured by the point system, and they will get a state medal, and they can bring their friends and family, and there'll be some press around it, and they can feel proud. So that is what it is. It's no more complicated than that. Our goal is to encourage, measure, recognize acts of kindness. It can be whatever you want. It doesn't have to be money. Probably won't be. It can be, cross a blind person over a 6-lane road without either of you getting killed, that kind of thing. It can be you doing anything. I did one actually last week. We had the strangest thing. I live in Santa Monica, and there was a mountain lion, 7 feet long, weighing 140 pounds, that found itself in the middle of the populated part of Santa Monica, 14th Street and Montana Avenue. And, very dangerous for anyone with a small child or a dog or a cat or something. And I went around, they closed down the immediate area while they tranquilized the big cat and took it back off to the mountains. But I went all around on my bicycle and told people who had cats, dogs, and small children, go home, don't go in that direction, and keep your pets and your children safe. That is an act of kindness. I didn't have to do that. It was my pleasure to do it. I got 10 points on the system for doing that. So that is rockkindness.com. It doesn't matter if you haven't got anything to write it down with. It doesn't matter, because it's just rock kindness. Doesn't matter if you enter it as a .org or as a .com. And if you can't remember how many Ks there are in the middle, you can use 1K or 2Ks, because all 4 combinations go to the same place. And I hope everybody watching will join us, and let's try and make the world a kinder place.
That's the goal at the end of the day. Anyways, that's going to do it for this interview, guys. Thanks so much to Peter for coming on and sharing his incredible initiatives. If you guys want to see more amazing interviews, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Autism Digest channel. Pick up our latest issue centered around the arts by going to autismdigest.com. And stay tuned for the audio file to be posted on our Spotify. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.